When is a song truly finished? Is a song ever truly finished is the question.
You're listening to the Inside the Mix podcast with your host, Marc Matthews.
Hey folks, welcome to Inside the Mix. In this episode, we're diving into another Ask Me Anything. I don't know if that's going to be the actual title of this going forward, but I've just put it here in the notes. Session where myself and my co-host here, R9 Tim Benson, will be answering, not asking you questions, answering your questions. How are you, Tim? How are things?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Yeah, a bit tired, but I'm all right.
Yeah, good. We were discussing off air the fact that it is wet and windy, and I'm fairly certain it was the last time we spoke as well. Yeah. It always seems to be the way in the southwest.
Yeah, literally, if you could hear it outside, it sounds like one of those movies where someone's lashed to the mast and, like, you know, it's just like the wind and the rain keep pouring over.
Yeah.
It's really
buffeted, as we say. Yeah, indeed.
Exactly.
So this is another one of these episodes whereby we're answering your question or questions. Before we dive in, if you do have a question, we'd love to hear from you. Click the SpeakPipe link in the episode description to submit your question. Share your social media handle or website and get featured on the podcast. All you need to do is click on that link. You don't need a SpeakPipe account. You don't need any particular setup. It's just like sending an audio message and just say, hey, it's whatever your artist's name is. My question for Mark and Tim is, you can find me at XYZ. And then you get featured on the podcast. Plus one lucky question will win a coffee voucher on me. I say coffee because I like coffee. And if you don't like the coffee, you can just give it to someone else. If you want to know what this sounds like in practice, check out episode 175 of the podcast. Moving on to this actual episode. This month's question comes from podcast listener Michael. And it's the one thing a lot of songwriters, artists, and producers can relate to. And here's his question. So this is an instance whereby he actually emailed me. So you can email me the question as well. The link to do that, or rather you can DM me. You can click on the Instagram link in the episode description. So his question is this. I finished a song, but it feels just good rather than truly compelling. I want to create music that takes listeners on a journey they enjoy rather than one they simply tolerate, with a few interesting moments. I really like that description. Do you have any advice on how to make songs more engaging? Should I stop pushing to finish songs alone and instead collaborate with a producer who can bring out the full potential of the song? So it's a fantastic question, Michael. Many of us have been in this position whereby a song feels technically finished. I have many times, but lacks that special spark, that something to make it interesting. So today we're going to unpack why some songs feel just good instead of great, the role of collaboration in unlocking a song's potential, and when to refine versus when to let go. So let's dive in with this then. So the first topic of conversation I thought would be good. Why do some songs feel uninspired even though they're finished? So is it a melodic issue? Is it a production issue? Is it an emotional connection? Is it artistic vision? So I've spoken a lot to begin with. So I'll throw this over to you, Tim. What are your thoughts?
I was just trying to unpick this one because I think in one sense, like, you can get to that point, can't you, where you've got everything finished and you feel like it's reasonably well produced, and you can't sort of find anything more to sort of add or take away to make the song sound better, but it just may not be your greatest song. It may lack some sort of thing. And sometimes I wonder whether we'll get a song like that and we know it's good, but we are missing that spark. And I don't know whether you can always find and add that. Sometimes you can, but sometimes you're better to move on and write another song, write another piece of music, because sometimes I think it just happens. It happens that all the ingredients come together right. Your emotions are right. You've got something that you're trying to communicate in the track, and you've kind of hooked onto that. You know, all the production has come together, and it works. I mean, I don't know that you can walk in the studio and write Stairway to Heaven or every day. You can't just write an absolute classic song. There isn't a formula for it. So I would put that out there. That doesn't mean that this question isn't valid, but I think sometimes maybe retreat and sort of going, well, accepting that not everything is great that you write is important, and sort of going, well, I'll live to fight another day. I'll write another track, and maybe the next track will be a classic. But then, at the same time, I think there are things that you can do to your track to make it more engaging, to perhaps add that special something that really hooks people in. And I think hook is probably the biggest word there. Is like, people love things that are hooky, that they remember, that they don't just go, oh, that was nice, and then there's nothing sticky in their heads. So I think vocal melody, or if it's instrumental hook is nobody really remembers the track because the drum groove was incredible if it doesn't have a great melodic hook or vocal hook, so that is important. Or lyrical hook as well, maybe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just going back to what you said there about with regards to the song, and not every song is going to be Stairway, is it? Ultimately, I think there's a quote by Ed Sheeran. I could be paraphrasing here, and I might be totally making this up again like I did last time. Well, I didn't make the last one up about Copland and his hi-hat. I didn't make that up. No, it was reported that was true. Somebody,
that was true,
it was
he
Carl.
Was flown in, wasn't he?
Neon Highway, he did back me up on that. So Ed Sheeran, it was something along the lines of like, you write all these songs, and you just write a plethora of songs, and it's only the small percent that will actually make it the cream of the crop that will rise to the top. And you've got to go through that process of just creating and writing and exercising that creative muscle. And then eventually it will happen. You'll have that one standout moment, I think. And if I look, I haven't got an extensive back catalogue, but I certainly, both when I was in the metal band and my solo stuff, there are songs that stand out above others where I thought, you know what, I really hit my stride in the groove in that one.
Yeah.
Air quotes. But there are other songs where I'm like, it's finished, I'm happy with it, I'm going to release it, but it doesn't stand up against the rest of my catalogue. But I release it anyway, because you've gone through that hard work and that process of doing it. You might as well put it out there. But another thing you said there about the hook, one thing I like to think of as well, and I don't know if this transcends all genres, because it probably doesn't, is to get to the point relatively quick as well. If you want to grab that listener's interest, it's to get to that hook or get to that point pretty quick, because we have very short attention spans, I think.
Yeah.
I do this when I'm listening to music and releases, what's the playlist on Spotify? Friday, whatever
Release
it is.
Radar.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Release Friday. I don't know what that is. Made that up. But yeah, there are songs in there. And for me, again, this is probably an indictment of my attention span. Unless it grabs me pretty quick, I either move on to the next one or I zone out. And then it just becomes background music for me, which, I don't know, again, it's an indictment on my attention span. But I think also what you mentioned there about the hook, and I've noticed this when I've submitted songs to Submit Hub and playlist curators, and I fall foul of this, where sometimes the response is the melodic line doesn't grab me, and it's something I know I need to work on. And so it echoes what you said there about having that hook, that melodic line, for example, in an instrumental that really does grab the listener.
Yeah, because I remember having that on. Well, if I look back on my catalogue, it's like it's funny. It's like the very first song I released, Miami Nights, which seemed to get it's definitely got a good response from everyone.
Very good song.
But it's weird that, because I can't write that song every day of the week. I just can't write a song that in some sense is as hooky or as catchy. Or I can't. I don't quite know where that came from. It just sort of happened and came out. It was, and it came out that way. And it took a lot of work, actually. But I think the basis of the song, which is only a 2-chord song, there's nothing special about it. But somehow the ingredients of it were hooky enough. But then there are certain elements of it that took a lot of work at, like the kind of melody at the beginning. That wasn't there initially, and it was actually my wife Lisa who sort of helped come up with that. And like she felt like there needed to be a sort of hook at the beginning. She sort of picked up something in the track, and then suddenly, that was actually really a good part of the song. And so it's funny that sometimes certain parts of the song you have to work on and get something for, but the actual core of the song, I think, was there from the word go. But I still didn't really know that it was that, going to be well received or that good a song until I released it. So sometimes you have to just go, well, I think this is decent, but I don't know if people like it or not, and release it anyway, and push it anyway, and then you can be surprised. I mean, sometimes the tracks that you don't think are all that special, sort of tracks that you aren't entirely sure you're happy with, even like technically or whatever, get really good responses, maybe better responses than tracks that you thought were brilliant. So you can't be entirely sure. I mean, which is one of the joys of writing things and putting them out, is getting the reaction, and it's not always the reaction that you thought you'd get. So,
Yeah, most definitely. And I think we are our harshest critics as well as creatives. I think in most creative mediums, people as creators, we're like that. You're always going to be your harshest critic. And I think just like you say, just release it and see what the response is. And going back to what I said just now, I think, and like you said with Miami Nights, it's a case of you just hit your stride with one particular song. You may find it takes longer to put it together, and then you might do another one that's really quick, and you think actually this might not have legs, but I'll release it anyway. And then I've noticed I've had this happen, and then suddenly it just takes off, which is you just never know what's going to happen. The beauty of the music industry, you just never know.
I think you're right, though, that kind of grabbing people quickly thing, that is a really good thing. And they say it, a lot of playlisters and curators will just go, well, if it hasn't grabbed me, I know when I do my curation, it's just like, I've got to listen for like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and if something's grabbing me at that point, then I'm probably going to listen a bit further in, and then I might add it to the playlist or whatever. But like, if there's just nothing happening, I might skip on to see if anything happens. Yep. But, it's just like, make something compelling happen sort of fairly early on. Get to the point. Don't just, because our attention span has probably got, with streaming and everything else, has got shorter.
And I think as well, before we move on to the next part of this, is for me, and I appreciate not everyone's willing to do this, but like I like to just take risks with what I put in a song. Whether it's like found sounds, sound effects, instruments themselves, just take risks to make things interesting. Obviously, you don't want to go too crazy. Well, I suppose you could go crazy, but I think just sprinkle those little bits in just to make it interesting. I find I had one song where there's a rainforest in it, another one where there's, it's cliched now, but there's like a telephone, and then at the end of it, the telephone starts to distort and do this otherworldly sort of sound to it. And I was thinking, you know what? I'm just going to put it in and see what happens. Just experiment as well, I think is key. Yeah. But again, I guess it depends on the vibe of the song. Yeah, you
can sort of not lose your genre, not lose the kind of accessibility of your song, but don't make it just sound like a copy of everything else, because why? We're just not interested in just yet another copy. Or maybe we are, but to a lesser extent. And I think that's probably true of the great songs, Bohemian Rhapsody, does not sound like any other song. No A&R man was that keen to put it out. So, but it does actually grab you as being interesting from the word go, and it takes you on a massive journey. And, it's sort of excellent in its production, excellent in the way it's put together. Musical content is fantastic, but it is very different. It is not like every other song. It's not. It was very different on the day. So, sometimes being different is a very good thing.
Yeah, I think this segues nicely onto the next part, which is, should you collaborate with a producer to unlock the song's potential? And I think the reason I say it segues quite nicely is having that external set of ears or that possibly objective viewpoint can also help you to identify if you are going to experiment, maybe to help point you in the right direction. However, I appreciate working with a producer, finances involved, it's not open to everyone, but I think there are other ways that you can sort of have that producer-esque role in your production, whether that's sort of having a group of producers, artists that you can lean on And then in turn, they lean on you as well. You share songs. I know we do this, share songs back and forth and
definitely.
for feedback and whatnot. Although I appreciate producers, there's going to be a financial outlay. There are other ways that you can get feedback on your music and your creations other than a producer. And at some point, I'm sure there will be an AI. Would there be an AI producer? Would I trust it? Not entirely sure. Maybe in the future. But that's I'm a huge advocate of just getting a second set of ears or a fresh set of ears to listen to a production and mix for their feedback, because they're going to hear things that you won't hear. And at the same time, if they're listening to it, I was going to say blind ears, whatever it is, they might not hear the problems that you're hearing, which I have found often. You know, specifically like we get hung up on snares and kick drums. And it turns out that's not the issue at all. It's the bass or something along those lines. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the whole role of the producer, let's say for like indie artists and artists who maybe don't have the finances to collaborate with an expensive producer?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I definitely think for some artists, I found a lot of singer-songwriters who I would class them as that they maybe the production side of it and their skills in the production field, it's not their thing, that they find it doesn't come naturally. Some people are not technical, it doesn't come naturally. Yet they sit down with a guitar and they'll piano and write something really good song-wise, or something that's sort of got the bones of being really good, but they don't know how to arrange it, they don't know how to sort of, and it can be really, really useful to sit down with a producer, not just an engineer, but a producer, someone who can really help you with the writing of the song, help you with the organisation of it, and putting it together from a sound point of view. So it definitely can be good, and not everyone is gifted at that sort of thing. And sometimes knowing your limits is actually the way to really make your music better. But there is an incredible wealth of resources, isn't there, for all of us now out there, and very cheaply or even for free. And there are a lot of other fellow artists who are, trying to do the indie producer thing, who would like to be supported by you and support you in return. So, I do think those communities of artists are phenomenal for this. I mean, I have the Synthwave Fam, which is my sort of chat group on Instagram, which has been doing all kinds of things for years now, and it's a really great resource for all of the members of it. And we definitely share a lot about what we do, and we get feedback from everyone, and sometimes it's just like easier to send it to just, you start to realize, I find it useful when these people send me feedback, and I don't find it so helpful talking to these people, because not everyone maybe is on the same wavelength, or you find there. So like, I know I send you stuff, and like we sort of do that because I think we find each other's feedback helpful. And sometimes there are some time where you're talking to someone and the feedback, you just have to sort of be cautious, because not all feedback is helpful. But it is a fantastic thing to do, and I do it myself.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned there about not all feedback can be useful sometimes. And I think it's important, like you say, to know that if you've got feedback, you don't necessarily always have to action it. It is feedback and it is an opinion, and it's a viewpoint. But generally, I would say, I guess, like if multiple people that you trust, and I guess you curate your own feedback circle, as it were, and have you've got people. Okay, I'm having issues with the mix, so I know these people here who are established, they're well revered in mixing. I can send it to them. Or maybe I'm having a problem with this arrangement and the songwriting element. I know these guys are really good at songwriting and actually arranging, so I'll send it to them for feedback, and just curate this really supportive network and do it that way. But at the same time, folks, if you do that, don't expect feedback like straight away.
No,
everyone's very busy. It's not going to be a case.
Just reminds me, I've got to give you some feedback on something. I still haven't given it to you. Yeah,
I think that mix.
You've released the track now.
Yeah. I was going to do that mix today, but I got waylaid with recording a podcast episode. Yeah, Yeah, 100%, man. And I've listened to that mix now, and I've made notes of it. But yeah, that is true. Yeah, but yeah, that is testament to it, folks. Sometimes you might not get that feedback straight away. It does happen, but know your limits. I like what you said there about knowing your limits. You can't be the master of everything. I think you got to know when it's time to outsource, and I think that's just across the board. If that's like promotion or just anything along those lines with regards to your music and your creativity. If you try and do everything, I suppose you can do everything, but sometimes
not everyone looks good in a tracksuit dancing.
Exactly. Yeah. That's totally thrown me off now. you can't do everything, but I suppose you can. Or you either invest in outsourcing or you invest in yourself to learn that particular area, and there's plenty of resources out there for you to learn a particular, but do your due diligence, do your research. If you're going to invest in a course or something like that, look at the reviews and also chat with people who have done it and completed
That's
that course.
A really good idea.
Always do that, no matter what. Even outside of music, I find it's like I've been looking at roofers lately to fix a chimney of mine, and yes, totally a bit of a tangent, but I've been looking at reviews and also talking to neighbours who have used them as part of my due diligence process.
Yeah, and it's the same with mixing or mastering or engineering or production. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's a very good idea to do that. Yeah, you got to. I think as well, like when it comes to those sorts of things, it's not just getting someone who's technical, figuring someone who you find you can communicate with well, who communicates well with you, and who gets what your music is about and gets where you're coming from and what you're trying to achieve, because not everybody gets everything, and it's a big part of being a producer is, years ago I used to do all kinds of different bands, live bands, and one sort of stuff I did in the studio quite a bit was sort of a lot of metal bands would come in, but not that I don't love some metal, because I do, but I just didn't really click that well with producing that genre. I mean, I could do a reasonable job of it because I knew all the stuff, all the engineering, all the mixing, I know it from a technical point of view. But the actual sound and honing the sound that those guys want, I needed to really be, I think, more in that genre myself, more listening to it constantly, more aware of all of it. And so I actually found that I just thought it was not my best genre to work in, and I would often almost kind of, hold back from sort of taking on those projects because I didn't think I was going to do the best job for the client. So, you do want to find someone who's really knows what you're about and says, I get that, and I can really make this work, and here's examples of it, and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you are going to outsource, like you say there, is to have that conversation up front. And I think pretty quickly when you're chatting to someone, even before you've spoken about the project itself, you'll be able to get an idea of whether or not, is this a person I can work with? Can I talk to this person? Just in that initial sort of, hi, how are you? How's your day? Whatever it is, when you first meet them, you'll get an idea of whether or not, it's kind of like not a job interview, but I guess if you, in a way, pretty quick if you're gonna hire someone or not, based on that initial interaction. A lot is done in that initial hello and that greeting. So yeah, most definitely, you need to have that rapport with the person you're working with, most definitely. So the final part here is this is quite a tricky one, and I don't know if there's a definitive answer to this, but when is a song truly finished? Is a song ever truly finished is the question. That is the question. Is a song ever truly finished? So does it serve its purpose and vision? Have you pushed it as far as you can alone? Does it connect emotionally with the listeners? Now, this is an interesting one because I have personally, from my own production perspective, I give myself a time frame. I'm trying to hit a cadence of releases. So I give myself a time frame with which I'm going to work within. And then so long, obviously, if it's an absolute dog, then I'm not going to release it and it's not going to see the light of day. But if it gets to a certain point in my cadence of release in my schedule, and I'm thinking, you know what, this is of releasable quality, that's then when I start going through the process of, okay, well, I'm going to mix it and then master it, and I'm going to get it uploaded for release. And my thought process goes back to what we were discussing earlier, is if I continue with this cadence and exercising this creative muscle, not every song is going to be a banger, but at some point, in theory, the laws of probability, hopefully, one of those songs will rise to the top. And that's my thought process, and that's what I've been employing lately. So in a year's time, when we get back together, I might be totally different and say that did not work for me, and I'm going to do something different. But that's what I'm employing at the moment. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of similar. I do have a release schedule these days and try to sort of keep to the release schedule. And, but, yeah, I think you've got to allow room for inspiration as well, and you've got to allow room to go off at a tangent sometimes, and you know, sometimes you will start something and not really know, you know, where it's going and whether it's going to work, and you sort of create something that's like, actually it's funny, like Goes to the Sea, which I wrote, like it's got like a sort of weird Nine Inch Nails piano thing going on, which was the whole hub of the track, which didn't really have a lot to do with the genre and where I was heading with the whole track initially. Didn't even know it was called Goes to the Sea, but, you know, as I was heading to this sort of thing, and it didn't seem to make sense, but I just liked something about that thing I came up with, and eventually that idea found a home and gradually turned into that track. And, you know, it was quite a process getting there. But so sometimes I think you can come up with something and you know that that's got a root or a sort of, you know, a sort of nugget in there that is good. And you go, yeah, there's something in this, but you might not be able to finish it straight away. Don't give up on it. Maybe like come back to it and just kind of keep knocking away until maybe something will appear out of it, you know. But like, there are other times where you do have to give up on something and just go, you know what, I'm on sort of revision 34 of this and it still doesn't really work for me. I am going to leave it in the pile. But like, yeah, I mean, and sometimes where you sort of know maybe it could have more, you don't know what that thing is, nothing you try is working, but overall it sounds like a decent release, and you're going to mix master it and move on. So yeah, but don't throw away things, sort of, you know, you have to like allow inspiration, you know.
Yes, what you mentioned there is, I think, is really important, and it's something that I employ, and I think I took this from an episode I recorded a couple of years back, and I have a folder called WIP, Work in Progress, and in there I've got about 6 or 7 songs in various stages with numbers at the beginning, and every now and again when I finish a song and release it, I'll go back to that work in progress folder, and each one of them has a render bounce of an MP3 of that track, and then I'll listen to that, and then I might reorder it, because at the time when I created it, I might be, like you say, I might think, I'm not sure, but I don't delete it. I then go back and listen to it every time, and then I reorder them depending on, okay, well, I'm going to tackle this one next, or I get the vibe of this now, and that's worked really well for me. And I then have another folder, which is kind of like a backlog folder. And then if I really do think this one really does need to go back on the shelf, I then stick that into this backlog folder I've got, which has probably got about 15 projects in. And I do the same again. In there, got numbers on them, and I'll go through and have a listen. I mean, it takes an hour or so to go through it and then reorder it. But what I find in doing that is, the way I think of it is, like, I created that for a reason. I must have had some sort of inspiration at the time. So I'm not gonna bin it, but I'm gonna put it in either the backlog or the work in progress folder, and then I'll revisit them every time and just reorder them depending on how I'm feeling. So I'm going through this house phase at the moment. So I'm finding all those particular projects are rising to the top in terms of numbers, and I'm just ticking them off one by one.
Is that because your house moving, that you're going through a house stage?
It might well be. It might well be. Like this whole process now, everything is revolving around houses, roofs getting done, chimneys on the piss, all this sort of stuff.
House music.
I could do a whole episode moaning about the conveyancing process in the UK. Absolute shit show. But yeah, going back that, so it just echoes what you were saying there about, like, don't bin them and then revisit them. Because in my head I'm thinking, well, I must have done it for a reason. You know, it must be there for a reason. But I think this is great. This is our third installment of this format. I think it's a brilliant format, folks. If you, like Michael, want to submit a question, so that was a great question, Michael, by the way. I know a lot of artists and producers are feeling the same way, so hopefully there was some nugget of information in there you can take away. If you want to submit a question and get it featured on the podcast like today, hit that SpeakPipe link, record your question. Remember, hey, Mark and Tim, it's blah, blah, blah. This is my question. Submit that. Alternatively, just DM me on Instagram. There's a link in the episode show notes, or you can email me, mark@synthmusicmastering.com, and email me with a question, and we'll get it featured. Tim, It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure as always.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Yeah, indeed. And we'll reconvene in a month's time and do it all again. Hopefully with better
I think
weather.
we're going to Bristol for beer and burgers before then. So there we go.
Yeah, we are. That's next weekend, isn't it? Yeah. Hopefully it's not. It might be more than just me and you.
Apparently,
in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But cheers, mate. I'll catch up with you soon.